Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Modern Mentoring with Lani Phillips. Well, first of all, I know I've been gone for a while, and a number of you have been very curious about what's been going on with Lani. So, someone that I'm so fond of is here with us today. We're actually going to do something called reverse interviewing. So, I would like to introduce you all to one of my mentees and dear friends, Miss Ehui Osei-Mensah. She is an incredible woman that you all are going to get to know a little bit more about, but she's actually going to be interviewing me. So I am going to hand it over to you, Ahui, because you've been looking forward to doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lani. Thank you for having me on here. This is an honor to interview you. As you rightly said, I've been looking forward to asking you some burning questions. Even though I have had the privilege of, listening to you and following your guidance for years when we were both at Microsoft. So I'm looking forward to this. I currently work as the Senior Director for Product Strategy at a company called Seramount Research, where we deal with research, advisory, and consulting services to Fortune 500 companies about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So a little bit of a different spin from what I was doing at Microsoft, but what I'm doing now. And I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about what you're up to and learning more about your treasure trove of experience.
Well, I look forward to you asking me questions, but let me ask you one. Are
Sure.
you enjoying your new role?
I am. I am. I love being able to, intellectually think about how do I support chief diversity officers to help the organizations become more inclusive workspaces. I know that DEI is going through interesting times right now, but it's really nice to think about how to strategize, give them the insights they need, the training, the networking that is helpful to get them to guide the organizations through these transitional times.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're in a role like this because it will challenge you because you are an intellect for sure. So this is really going to be good for you. So, all right, over to you. What do
Yeah.
you want to know?
A lot, but I'm going to ask you five main questions, and I hope we cover
Okay.
everything that I'm trying to get from you. But the first is about balancing career aspirations. So now, balancing this work-life balance situation with, a very successful career. You've done it for over 2 decades. A lot of women in business struggle to balance family life and then success in business. How have you done it? What methods have you used to survive so beautifully? Tell us the secrets to your success. Can women truly have it all?
Well, you know what? Let's start with the last question you just asked, and then I'll share with you some strategies. Do I really think a woman can have it all? First of all, it depends on how you define all.
Mhm,
Okay? Because all can mean so many different things. But let's say, for the context of this conversation, it is career,
mhm,
it's family, right? Kids,
mhm,
it is having a partner that you share your life with, and
mhm,
being able to have a rich, vibrant community of friends and people that you come together with on a regular basis.
mhm,
And I would tell you that I believe you can have it all,
mhm.
but you can't have it all at the same time where everybody's going to be happy with what you're giving. There's
Yeah.
going to be some trade-offs,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And I think it's important for everyone to understand that you may feel like you have it all, but there will be constant trade-offs. So there's some things that I've learned. One is I have to set boundaries. I
Okay.
have to set boundaries around my time to say, hey, am I going to take my kid to school? Am I going to pick my kid up from school? Are there any special events that I want to be responsible for being there or taking them to the events? I have a son, as you know, and my kiddo is everything to me. So I want to make sure that I carve out time for him, but I had to defer to his dad a lot
Mhm,
because I also had that career that was requiring me to travel and
mhm,
requiring me to be in places, so I couldn't be present all the time. So let's talk about the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
In your relationships with your partner,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to have two main things. You got to have communication
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to have compromise. And that communication and compromise, you need to be constantly checking in on that because they may have a career or they may have other priorities that they need to prioritize. And then you're going to have to step up more to care for the family. You need to understand that if you are going to be out, who's going to be there to take care of the family, to feed them, to make sure they get to wherever they need to be. I would also tell you, I had to learn how to outsource. A lot of people have family around them, so they can send them off to grandma or grandpa or over to auntie, uncle. I didn't have all that luxury, right? I was living in Chicago, and so I had to outsource. It was always either me or my husband at the time, or it was always, hey, you better go find a nanny or somebody that's going to step in to help you. Or you ask some of your friends to step in, because I have incredible friends that stepped in. But I would also tell you, it was also about the power of being able to say no. There were some things I was going to say yes to, but I had to be comfortable saying no when I needed to prioritize things.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you that I didn't always get it right. And I also had to learn how to give myself grace and learn how to process those emotions of guilt. Because when you are a working mom, you do carry that guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be able to let go of that guilt and really be able to just negotiate those important events and life experiences that are most important to the people you care about, and then prioritize that. And then the last thing I would offer you is self care. I
Mm-hmm.
really had to learn the importance of I couldn't pour from an empty cup. I really needed to create space to take care of me, mind, body, and spirit. And so it might have meant getting up a little earlier or making sure that I take off a little early in the afternoon so I could go see a trainer, go to the doctor, go to a therapist, or whatever I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it is so important that in order for you to be able to balance it all, don't forget to put you on the list, and that self care is so important.
Yep, that's one for the books. Don't forget to put you on the list. We often do. We often do as women. So that's great advice, Lani. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Now let's move a little bit to Microsoft, your time at Microsoft. Now you had an impressive journey there, tenure of over 25 years. That's an entire life. Um, but as you reflect on your journey, do you think that the sacrifices that you undoubtedly made, the commitments that you made, were they ultimately worth it? If you had a chance to relive your time at Microsoft, would you approach your career a little differently? And if so, how?
It's in full transparency, I would say that my career at Microsoft, it was just an incredible ride.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an opportunity to experience things that only people dream about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that the commitment and the sacrifice was worth it in some cases.
Mm. Okay.
All right. There were a couple of areas where I should have made different decisions.
I see.
And it was during the time that I wanted to have children.
Mm.
Having children didn't come easy for me.
Mm.
And I found myself having to make frequent visits to the doctor, and I was hospitalized for most of my pregnancy.
Mm.
But I had just ascended to second level leadership. So I was an M2, where I was managing managers for the first time. And I was so worried about the perception that I wasn't as committed to my job that the entire time I was in the hospital, I worked. Now, the company didn't ask me to do that, but I made that sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
because I was more worried about the perception of things
Mm-hmm.
versus me saying, this is an important life event. I really should unplug, be present, leverage my benefits,
Mm-hmm.
and try to bring some healthy children into the world.
Right.
But I didn't make that choice. So that's one mistake that if I could go back in time, I would make a different decision.
Mm.
And make sure I say this, no one was pressuring me. It was all me. It
Yeah.
was me trying to live up to what I thought I was supposed to do
Mm-hmm.
versus what really made sense.
Mm.
The second thing I would have done differently is I would not have stayed with a company as long as I did.
Yeah.
I favored loyalty
Mm.
because that's the way I grew up, right? You commit to a company that commits to you, you work hard, you give. And looking back on it, it's been an incredible gift. But how much further could I have gone had
Mm.
I bet on me and diversified my experiences? So after I've done, maybe I would have done maybe 7 to 10 years and then said, what are some new experiences that I want? And
Mm.
it could have been a smaller company, mid-sized company, or another large tech company. But just go get in a different environment
Mm-hmm.
and learn some different products,
Mm-hmm.
just a different set of business problems you have to solve, and just work with a different group of people. And I just would have diversified a lot more so that when I got to the end of my career, I would have felt even more equipped to start entrepreneurships because
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing I'm in now. And all
Uh-huh.
these things I'm learning as a part of a startup, I could have got some of those experiences along the way had I been willing to diversify. So those are two areas that I probably would have done differently.
Differently. Wow. Thanks for sharing with us. Thanks for being vulnerable with me.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
those are definitely considerations that we make, both personally, as you mentioned, and then also in terms of the length of time at Microsoft. And I'm glad you brought that up because it kind of goes into my next question. Over recently, or over the years, there has been a bit of a general generational shift in attitudes towards whether we pay our dues and give companies long-term commitments, or whether we try different things, whether we prioritize flexibility, strategic pivots in our career. And you mentioned earlier that you wish that you had perhaps, yes, spent some time at Microsoft, but maybe tried other experiences.
Hmm.
What would you say, especially in today's rapidly changing job market, is the way to go for mid to entry level career folks who are thinking about whether to focus on one company and give it their all, or
Yeah.
to leave when it seems like there's a better option somewhere? Loyalty versus flexibility, I guess.
I don't want to put myself in the seat of telling people what they should do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because I think everybody is wired different. All
True.
right. There are some people who are wired to stick with one company, get to know those people. They are a loyalty people. They do not feel good about working here for a short period of time. It gives them a lot of anxiety to think about going to work for someone else. Okay. Because they want to build those relationships, invest in those relationships, and stay a long time. And there are pros and cons to that decision.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say, let's go back to you've got that generation that values that,
Yes.
right? And that's across all generations, believe it or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not just the people who are older. There
Mm-hmm.
are some people who really value that. And I would say that's okay because that's where you're going to gain wisdom. That's where you're going to gain experience. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
I do think though that even if that is the person you are, keep your mind open though,
Mm-hmm.
because the world is changing quickly. And you are going to be surrounded by people who are going to want more flexibility and make more strategic pivots. And they are not going to want to commit as long as maybe you've committed. So I would say just making sure that you don't hold a strong bias that prevents you from being able to support and work positively with other people who don't have your same shared philosophy about how to commit. Okay, or how long to commit. And I would say for those that subscribe to, I want flexibility. I want to be able to make strategic pivots. I don't want to, invest a long time with a company. I would say more power to you. But I want to encourage them to say, go for your dreams. But
Mm-hmm.
remember, there is real value in wisdom and experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only gain that if you spend a fair bit of time in a role. You
Mm-hmm.
may say the first year, I'm there to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the second year, I'm there to master it.
Mm-hmm.
And some people even struggle to master it. And if you do desire to go vertically in your career, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to also want to think about gaining experience around, well, how do I transform it? And transforming things takes more time. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you don't give yourself time to learn those skills as you grow in your career, you're going to find you're going to get stuck because you don't have the skills and experiences to support you as you're facing new challenges. So there is definitely benefit in committing a little bit longer because there are people who think 6 months time to hop. I don't think you've been there long enough
Yeah.
to gain the experience you need that will ultimately support you as you move on through your career. So I think it takes both, but I think it's important that we keep the lines of communication open no matter what side you're on. Let's continue to support one another because we're just going to continue in this environment where we're going to have more and more Gen Zs enter into the workplace and they don't necessarily subscribe to what their parents did, which is commit for a long period of time to companies because they're not seeing the same level of commitment from the company to
Yeah.
the employees. So there's a different mindset, and I think there's a place for both. But we just need to keep talking, keep the lines of communication open, continue to support one another's goals and dreams.
Awesome. So keep your mind open, number one, and
Yeah,
take time though to learn it, to master it, and then to transform it. And gain that experience in your pocket before you make another strategic pivot, perhaps.
yeah, for sure.
Hmm. Well, over these, this was obviously very insightful so far, and but over the span of your career, what other introspective insights have you gained about your own personal growth, your
Mhm.
purpose, perhaps, and your mission? I know that's a difficult question. What's your purpose? What's your mission? But what have you learned over the years that have kind of directed you closer to that ultimate purpose for your
Yeah,
life?
for sure. Well, being a minority woman in business, and especially in high tech,
Mm-hmm.
in the early days, I didn't see a lot of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look for people to role model, they tend to be more masculine than feminine. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would say early on, and I was raised by my dad because my mother passed when I was 12. So I found myself really just kind of modeling more masculine behaviors. And I think as you grow and as I got older, I just really start to stand in my own power and recognize that that didn't feel like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just continued to surround myself around people who challenge me to continue to own my voice and to be authentic to who I am and to do what I call the lonely work to say, what's important to you? What are those things that really drive and move you? And one of the things that I had early experience with, I had an executive coach who really did some work with me around what were those things that were keeping me up at night, that was bugging me about business.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it was just constantly on my mind. And it was really around how leaders were showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had a tremendous amount of passion around how leaders should show up in the workplace. So I started investing a lot more time in reading business books, leadership books, studying leaders, what works, what doesn't work. And it just became one of those little things I was doing on the side. And I knew being in leadership, I would always try on different things to see if it works and see what I got the most out of people. And then I just started figuring out what was a winning formula for myself. And then I realized that not a lot of people subscribed to the work that I was doing. People were more focused on winning
Yeah.
versus winning with people.
Mm.
And I really just started to recognize that it made me different, and that's okay. But I needed to stand in that power and recognize that that could now be my superpower.
Mm.
And I just needed to carry it with me everywhere I went. But then I began to do the work around mission.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I really want to be the difference I want to see in the world. And
Mm.
that's when I recognized that my superpower, I was just going to have to continue to try to role model it
Mm.
and hope that I create such a great experience for others that other people would, inquire about it. As you know, I try to do a lot of mentoring and support people as they were on their own journeys, career journeys and leadership journeys. And I supported a lot of people on that because it was just something that came natural for me because it was a passion and I invested in it. So
Mm.
it really helped guide me and I would say shaped who I was as a leader. But what it also did for me is it became a compass for me
Right.
to help me make decisions that were very thoughtful, grounded in my values. And when I saw that people weren't role modeling the right behavior, I did not mind speaking up, still with kindness,
Mm-hmm.
but it was time that somebody
Mm-hmm.
speaks up about what wasn't right. So I really started to own my voice more.
Mm.
So I would tell you that all of that combined really helped shape me as a leader at Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
And it really has shaped what I've chosen to go do next in my career because I really do believe there is a way to do it and keep the people whole.
Mm.
You can still get the results with the people kept whole in the process. And I've seen so many people get lost along the way. And I want to be a part of helping to create a better world as we
Mm.
think about business going
Mm. So many great sound bites. You can still get results, but keep the people whole. That's amazing. I'm
forward.
going to keep that in mind. Thank you, Lani.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You mentioned something important in your last answer when you talked about not seeing too many people who looked like you to model after when you started your career. And so my next question goes a little bit more into that. As a Black woman
Yeah,
who has
yeah.
risen to senior executive positions, what specific challenges related to race and gender have you encountered along the way? And how have you successfully addressed or overcome them? In addition, do you have any advice for some of us in marginalized groups who want to excel in corporate America, want to be able to navigate these challenges too?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for us?
Well, let me start with the first question, then I'll answer the second. I think the biggest issue that I was up against,
Mm-hmm.
of course, some of the obvious ones, but I would say perception bias.
Yeah.
Everybody has this perception of who you are,
Yeah.
and then that narrative is transferred from one person to the next. And you're always confronted with other people's perception of who they think you are versus them meeting you where you're at and get to know
Yeah.
you. Right? They come in with preconceived ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned about that is one, you can stop and seek to understand what the perception of you might be, and then begin to do the work to try to change someone's opinion of you. But what I learned more than anything is that I can't change anyone's perception of
Yep.
me. And so, what I had to learn is to not be overly concerned about what people thought.
Mm.
And I do care about how I show up at work, how I deliver, where I have areas for improvement, those development areas. But if you have some perception of me that's not in alignment with who I am,
Mm-hmm.
I no longer care about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had to start looking at the woman in the mirror and liking who she was
Mm-hmm.
and waking up every day trying to bring my best self to work every day and treat people the way I want to be treated and stop being overly concerned about others. So that helped me find my voice, that helped me stand in my power, that helped me take some very calculated risks. It also meant that I stood up for myself and stood up for others when I felt like it was important. And that is something that just came from me releasing myself from other people's perception of me.
Yeah.
And the advice I would give to others in marginalized communities is never lose sight of the fact that we all have strengths and areas for development.
Yep.
So don't confuse someone's bias of you through that lens. Always go into those conversations staying curious to understand through examples what you're doing well and what you need to work on and put together a plan and work on those things. However, if you are dealing with things like perception of you and they just decide they don't like you, or you can tell that you're just not in a situation where people are embracing you, I would say stand in your power, find your voice, go get some support, some mentoring to make sure the way you are assessing the situation makes sense to someone else, because you might be missing some things, you may have some blind spots. But if you are in a place where you're just being tolerated and you can really tell that they do not care for you, they're not investing in you, they're not giving you opportunities, I would say get out of there as soon as you can. Because you don't want to invest time in places where you're just being tolerated, because you have this one career, right? You may do different things in your career, but we all have a limited time to do it. Life's too short for you to spend all those weeks, months, and years being miserable. I want you to be in places where people recognize your gifts and your strengths, and they celebrate what you bring, and they begin to leverage your strengths, invest in you, and you can continue to grow. That's where I want you to go so you can thrive and flourish. And that's what I would share.
That's great. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you stay in places where you're celebrated and not just tolerated. That's a great one. Easy to remember.
Yeah, for
Thank you so much,
sure.
Lani. I know that I could talk to you for the rest of the day if I had the choice, but just in keeping with time and my promise to just ask 5 questions, that's all I have for you today. But it's been so enlightening, and I really thank you for having me on your show and allowing me to put you in the hot seat this time.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I must tell you, I adore you. And I appreciate the questions that you asked. I think these are questions that a lot of people are wanting to know what works for others. So I hope I said something that's going to help someone. And I look forward to interviewing you someday, because I think you have a lot of wisdom to share as well. But thank you so much for doing this reverse interviewing and coming on Modern Mentoring with Lani. I appreciate you. And I look forward to us continuing our friendship and me supporting you on your journey. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Say likewise. Looking forward to it.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us on Modern Mentoring with Lani Phillips. I hope you were able to get something valuable from our conversation today, and I am looking forward to connecting with you again soon. Thanks for joining, everyone.